Okay, hello and welcome everyone to today's PermaTalks. The PermaTalks are brought to you by Wichrep Borosmäki and the European Permaculture Network. Today we have Călin Radulescu, and Călin is a dear friend of mine. He's one of the few who shares everything regarding permaculture on Facebook. Like every day I get about 10 posts in my inbox. Very interesting stuff. I don't often have the time to click, but yes. And Călin was also there for me when I had a real problem with the community. So I'm very thankful for him. Today, it's about the permaculture edge and permaculture storytelling. So he will bring together a lot of different things for us today. Călin, the stage is yours. All the best.
Hey. Thank you, Dominic, for this very kind presentation. Yeah, I'm honored to be here in front of you and to have also been there for other presentations. I just want to check for technical difficulties. How do I sound? Am I standing close enough to the microphone? My voice is going to be like this. At some point, it will stabilize. But I've been dealing with the weather. Sorry. Yeah, I think this opportunity is great for us to interact, to connect throughout Europe, and I think even more. And funnily enough, Dominique mentioned something that kind of was one of the first topics that we engaged in, and it's also very much linked to my presentation. So to me, it has a deeper resonance. So again, thank you to the European Permaculture Network for hosting this, for having selected my proposal. And again, I'm grateful to be here in front of you. So I have a lot of topics that I want to bring into the conversation. I have a lot of ideas, and I also did a lot of things that I felt before doing permaculture that I felt had a pretty deep influence. And to be honest, it's not a day that I don't do permaculture, but I also bring in something else from different frameworks, from different fields of application of just just life, I guess. I could leave it at that. So please be patient with me. I'm gonna try to fit them into 1 hour, 1 hour 10. This is the kind of time I've tried to rehearse it as well. And I've also done the storytelling. So your word, and I just want to make sure that you know that I'm gonna be engaging in three major storylines, which is my own journey in permaculture. So it kind of fits into the professional realm. Then there's the story of the demonstration site that I contributed to, that I designed and I co-implement with a lot of other people. And there's a very socially oriented storyline in that regard. So a lot of it has been done by me initiating some processes and implementing a technique, passing that information on first to my friends and clients. And then we've been passing on that information and we've been showing those techniques on a community level. So just from the overlapping of these two storylines, I thought there could even be a third storyline, which is something that I regard maybe as a template of how us in the permaculture world, but not just us. I think a lot of people can also apply these same principles in the permaculture world. I think they're best known as permablitzes. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I'm watching your heads. I do have the opportunity to interact with you. So again, we try to navigate the process of building this demonstration site. It's been 4 years and a half that we started the process. And what we've learned, we've tried to pass it on. So again, I hope that there's even the slightest hint of a template that other people, hopefully others will watch it, will get some inspiration from. So from what I would modestly call a template. In order to help the public kind of follow my train of thoughts, basically everything that I'm saying, almost everything that I'm saying, is also going to be featured on the screen. I've tried to feature a few pictures as well and to play with some graphics, but just simple stuff. If I say something twice, maybe you can let me know and I can try to make it smooth on the net. So I have the three storylines, but then I also worked quite a lot on bringing some of the frameworks that I really wanted to share with you. And I had been rehearsing, and I realized it's not going to be easy for anyone to follow my train of thoughts if they don't at least get a let's say a more objective sense of who those people are, what frameworks am I talking about, what techniques. So in the presentation, I'm actually going to talk about different frameworks that I've kind of applied over or with permaculture design in general. And I'm going to present them to you at first. You're going to have an overview of the topics that I'm addressing. So again, hopefully, you're not just going to lose sight of what I'm trying to say. And hopefully I'll reach a conclusion, but so there's going to be a small break after I finish presenting the frameworks. And then I'm going to go into a little exercise that I was doing, and it was not my proposal. Maybe you know her, Annette Argabright. She's from the United States, and she was my team leader. So I'm doing design professionally. And we were playing these games of seeing or of looking and seeing these opportunities to apply or to reinterpret permaculture principles in what we do in our design. So the final presentation framework, I do have to admit it, also came from her, from this exercise that she proposed to us as team members. So yeah, maybe someday she'll get to see this as well. So that being said, I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Thank you all for your attention. It really helped me a lot to kind of calm down because I got to see your faces. I got to express myself a little bit. So again, thank you for your patience. So here it is. Sorry. Please let me know if you can see my screen. Okay, I see two people nodding. So permaculture design beyond the edges. This is the overview of the presentation. So I chose a certain format, and I already mentioned it. I try to do some storytelling, and I asked myself the question, so I try to answer that question, and then I saw storytelling as a vehicle for human culture through time, something that I think the founders of permaculture also saw in the value that it brings. Again, I mentioned the authors, the pioneers, the source of inspiration, the people who have provided me with frameworks, even on a professional level. But before I got to have any idea, any clue, any real skill in permaculture, and these are mentioned at number 3. Then we will take a break, and I'll go more into my permaculture journey. So just a short presentation of myself, who I am, what I do, a small presentation of the place, of the physical space that I've trialed a lot of these techniques. And then I'm going to go into the reinterpreting or revisiting of the permaculture principles. And you'll get then one after the other, again, with a short version of what I'm saying. And also something that I'm working on right at the end. I haven't done a presentation for it. I'm just going to show you the book, and maybe some of you know it. It's a recently published book by Mark Krautchek. He's in the US, and he has done some wonderful work. And hopefully that will be inspiring for you as well. And at the end, some questions and hopefully some feedback. So why choose the format of storytelling? So it's because from a sociological point of view, human beings need stories to support their sense of self, their place in the world, in the known world. And in one way or another, we need storylines that empower our cultures, our behaviors, our ways of thinking, of doing, and of feeling. And stories in permaculture are important because the gestation and the becoming of permaculture is anchored in the work of Bill Mollison and David Holmgren and many of the communities with whom they came in contact, indigenous and traditional populations in different parts of the world. All of us and all of them were also building on the body of work, of knowledge, and of survival skills of many other guilds of people, of living beings before them. And these were also supported by storytelling. So, if any of you has come in contact with the direct work of Bill Mollison, for example, any of his courses, he says that knowledge through time was anchored in songs, in dance, and in visual stories and many other forms of human expression. Give me just a second here. So in 2020, when I embarked on my journey, I also wanted for storytelling to be an integral part of my way of interacting with the world. And first, I created my own website. You see it featured at the bottom of my screen. First, it carried my name, but at some point, I felt like I wasn't blending in. It was somewhat more of a capitalist view on knowledge or on skills. And then I bought the website, I bought the domain called Permaculture Storytelling. So again, thank you so much for being here, helping me bring this story forth. And again, I use the website to support my work and hopefully to inform other people of permaculture frameworks, of what to expect from permaculture designers, what to expect from the process itself if they get into permaculture. And although life is more complex and more nuanced than what I could ever weave into my presentation, again, I am fortunate and I feel honored to be able to present to you a storyline in which not only am I the storyteller, but from time to time, I'm also one of the characters. Um, from a more objective standpoint, I've also tried to look at the storytelling, so at least the way I see it, as something closer to stepping stones. So maybe storylines get too personal, but looking at it from a more objective point of view, hopefully people will find whatever elements fit within their context, whatever they can understand, whatever makes sense to them, and they can use those for creating their own stepping stones, their own journey through permaculture and through life. So enough about myself. This is an overview of the project, just a few pictures presenting it. Um, some satellite picture that was free to share. And the colors here, probably, I don't know if you can see my mouse moving. So I try to put in colors for the different zones of the project. So here in the center, you have the home, and it's a home for 8 people, 3 generations from the same family living basically under the same roof. Uh, and there's several entrances to the house. So that led for some very interesting design choices because at least theoretically we could have several zone ones if you're willing to play with those ideas. And zone one would be what you see on screen would be in green. And then pretty close to zone one, we had an area which was basically unusable because the house, the site location was so close to a river that when they built the house, it was the only constructible space left. So what would normally have been an ideal place for a garden, for a zone one garden, actually had to be covered with non-living soil. So a berm, not a berm, sorry, but a slope was created. So this little part here, maybe you can see I don't know how big it appears on your screen. These are some trees and some vegetation, which is a pity that we can't use, but over time we've learned to go past. Anyway, so zone one in green, and that features some pretty intensive spaces, and you're going to see some pictures of for them. And basically, what you have right here, if you're willing to follow my mouse, this is the greenhouse, the sunken greenhouse, the sunken polytunnel that we did in this ideal position, but unfortunately, before it featured unusable soil. Then we have a pretty diverse zone 2, featured here in blue, and it spreads, and over time, so it spreads into different areas, actually. And over time, these have gone some transformations. We have some interesting zone 3s as well, so they're in the more violet color here and here. And again, as I mentioned, because there are several entrances to the home, there was this opportunity to actually interact in different ways, and it's not just one user. It's people with different ages that interact with the space. So it led to some interesting design choices. And we have a little bit of space left for zone 4, which in time we learn how to better use. And yeah, I'm just looking at the pictures that are featured here. You see some vegetable gardens right here to the left, center left, so to speak. And this is now actually a community garden functioning within the bigger project. This is the staircase that leads to the compost toilets. And you'll see those in another picture. This is another feature that kind of grew out of building zone 1 and then zone 2 and then zone 3. We had an overflow of water. Because we wanted to integrate animals, this created, so there's some ducks here in the background, the whitish animals. This kind of afforded, so taking care of zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3, it's in this area here with the yellow that we got the opportunity because of the overflow and because of this water that we were controlling above in the landscape. And then it became interesting to work with it at that point, at that specific location. Anyway, so plenty of details. You're probably gonna see them featured again and again in different parts of the presentation. And I want to bring in the first different framework that I've tried to integrate into my permaculture practice, and this is Augusto Boal. And his life's work is better known under the name of Theater of the Oppressed. As you can see, I'm not going to repeat everything that you can see on screen. So to stick more to his storyline, because his own life story actually featured so many evolutions that I think it's interesting to see how this came about. So he was a theater director, and with his friend Paulo Freire, they were both exiled from Brazil. I think it was right after the first military coup in 1964. And in exile, they found themselves um, involved with the people, especially the peasants, the indigenous peasants of South America, who were at that time fighting for their rights to own the land that they were working. So it's a bit of a special situation. I'm not going to go into all of that. It's just that I found the value of this framework that I'm going to go into a little bit more because it was also linked to the work being done with peasants. And there was a parallel to be made there with the work of Bill Mollison, again, which I know only from stories and from some videos. And I've read the Permaculture Designer's Manual. So anyway, I'm trying to weave this kind of depth. So the work of Augusto Boal and Paulo Freire with the people fighting for their rights to own the land came in the form of educating them. Most of them were illiterate and actually had no property acts. So they had no way of proving. There was a lot of land grabbing at that point in time in several South American countries. And the way towards the liberation of these social classes was first by teaching them how to read and write. And second, and this is where the theater of the oppressed came to be, The second came to be from the chance that doing theater afforded these indigenous communities to actually prepare for the fight. I mean it in a literal sense, but also in a figurative sense. The fight that they had to go through to actually have the right to work, to produce, to earn their living, and also to support other people around them. Because at that point in time, I think South America, for the greater part, was pretty much hand labor and a lot of traditional methods. So forum theater, which is one of the main tools of theater of the oppressed, uh, came to be as the arena for rehearsing the life narratives of the landless. In Spanish and in Portuguese, these are called movimiento sin terra, so the people who have no land. And through this work, um, Augusto Boal came to the conclusion, and this was an active principle in his work, that liberation is an ongoing participatory process. Through critical consciousness, the oppressed not only liberates himself, but also the oppressor. So it's in this relationship that we have to change something profoundly, and this is the only way to enact change. Anyway, for me, it has been throughout my life for the past 13 years, to be honest, 13 or 14 years, this has been a staple. So you can see the other works of Augusto Boal featured here. I'm not going to go into reading them, sorry. The second author that I wanted to bring into the conversation is Peter Slade, and he was a pioneer in his field, which at that point in time didn't really have a name because it was at the crossroads of applied psychology and drama education. So for and maybe some people who are from the UK might have heard of him. Um, to my knowledge, and I've read, I think, 6 of his books, which I also feature here, he was the main driver behind the introduction of drama in the British school curriculum. So he found, through that direct work with a lot of young people of different ages, that the psychological state of mind, the general movement of the body, and patterns of behavior are all linked. So the physical imprint that human beings leave on the environment is directly linked to how they think, what perspective they have at that point in time, what feelings they have inside of them, and basically they act, and this enactment leaves an imprint behind them. His methods featured a lot of engagement, so he did a lot of movement theater, as I mentioned already, and as you can see from this picture taken from Child Drama, the book. He worked a lot with children, and children do not necessarily speak their feelings, their thoughts. They're much, much better at acting them out. So he developed his own type of drama, again, at the border of the two fields that I mentioned. And this featured a lot of dance. So as you can see them, if you're also looking at the other books that he has written, natural dance and experience of spontaneity. This features a lot more work about body in space and in interaction. And what I got from Peter Slade was also how to actually be a participant through silent observation from a favorable vantage point of the interaction between players. And when I say players, it's because this is the word that he kept using. So nowadays we would use actors, and these were child actors or youth actors. And he would find in the spaces that he was working in, he would find these vantage points that it would allow him to actually notice the imaginary curved lines that the bodies moving through space would leave. Again, this was something that he was recording. He was taking notes. He was drawing these circles, half circles, all these kinds of shapes, and he used this as a method for feedback. So what I see as something that could be analogous to permaculture design is what we do in the sector map, where we look at how different energies come onto site, and we can think of these energies as being humans, or having some wildlife come on site, or all kinds of interactions. So um, being familiar with the methodology and also the work, where the aim of the work of Peter Slade was, um, I found that this allowed me to have different points of view, and to it also helped me integrate sectors and zones and many other permaculture projects. Sorry, not projects, but concepts. So moving right along, it was for me, it comes naturally to talk about A.S. Neil and the Free School of Summerhill. To cut this part of the presentation shorter, because I think if everybody here is an English speaker, or if you've ever been to UK, maybe you've heard of this. So maybe my presentation, my written presentation, doesn't do it justice. So I'm just gonna kind of cut it short and give you the gist of it. The fact that A.S. Neil described school as this place of very dynamic learning, and this learning was done more by interacting, by real life doing. And also, from all of his descriptions of processes of teaching, of the many wonderful things that he featured in his books, I also got a wider frame about life, about kind of life that I would have liked to live at that point in time. This is what I imagined my life to be like, not necessarily being in a school, but being in an environment where everything that is being done actually has a purpose, has a meaning. It isn't just for practice and then we scrape it, we throw it away in the garbage, or it doesn't mean anything because it's just a rehearsal. So that's one aspect of it, but also, again, if my memory serves me right, and if I've understood the core of the work of A.S. Neil, it was also that a lot more things should be happening around the process of education, for that education, for that knowledge to actually be passed on. So I think in different ways, he was describing culture, or what Bill Mollison would later term as permaculture. So everything that comes into play when we act, when we interact with each other, the way we do so many things. And another thing, again, another takeaway from these books and from the work was that I think he was describing uh, the school farm, or the farm school. He didn't go into that many details, but to me, this was the environment. This was the holistic um, engagement that I was also longing to have in my life. And I got a lot of inspiration from his work. Um, Another source of frameworks, of points of view, even of knowledge, came from Jean Lindelof, and she was an American anthropologist, author, and explorer. Basically, what she did was go into the Amazon. She had this opportunity. It was not necessarily to come in contact with the indigenous natives that she met there in Venezuela, the Yaquana tribes, but I think she went on 3 different expeditions, or I think for us, we would call them expeditions. I think they were more like immersive living, because the time that she spent with them, she was asked, and this is the part that she played actually, to be one of them. And this direct observation of the indigenous approach to child rearing, and also to all kinds of all other aspects of life, again, for me, it opened the door to first get a sense of how everything is interconnected, how everything in our lifetime is actually showing up at different points in time. And this stems from several life-defining experiences. And I'm sorry, and she termed, well, not she termed, she named constant physical contact, responsiveness to the infant's needs, and allowing children to explore the world at their own pace, she found that this was the recipe for a life that had meaning, for a life that featured joy and celebration and grief and a lot of things. And I felt that she found something very genuine, very powerful, and even life generating. And later, when I would discover permaculture, again, these frameworks I felt were already kind of uh, either instinctively being awakened by the by the discovery of these books and of these practices, or I was informed by her work. So again, I wanted to share this with you. I've tried to say what was put in writing in a different way. Hopefully, I haven't bored you. I'm gonna try to move slightly faster. However, I am getting closer to the end of the first half. I'm looking at about 30 minutes, I think, until now, presentation. Brad Lancaster, which I think many more of you know, maybe even in person. I never got the chance to know him, but I got to know him through the independent stories of Kirsten Dirksen. So I think it was around 2018 or maybe 17. She visited Brad in Tucson, where he lives, with his brother, and in the meantime, I think they have new additions to the family. And something clicked. If there was ever one specific moment where I understood uh, how permaculture design could translate into my life, into somebody else's life who played this role, who was having this community um, role, who was having this community how can I put this? There's a word for it, but I can't remember it now. When you're kind of a springboard or somebody who motivates, who inspires a lot of people around you. So it was just as much about the just as much about the technical skills that he had. And I absolutely loved, if you have time to look at the story. If you don't know it already, I think it's worthwhile. It's about 50 minutes. And Brad just goes on and he shows all of these wonderful things that he has built around his house. And then we're taken on a different voyage and a different story almost. And we're immersed through some historical photos of how the neighborhood was before they started leaving their imprint on their environment. And when I say they, by that time, it was not only Brad and his brother, so let's say permaculture designers, but it was also the people around them, the community members. They started off as a neighborhood in which not a lot of people wanted to live, where you'd have some accidents, where you'd have some vehicles moving at high speed, and they started addressing the issues, the topics, and obviously, they did what we would call right now permaculture techniques and everything. But again, I think his work was way beyond any edges, any boundaries that one individual could have. So I think by now you've kind of gotten the gist of how I got to move in that direction because I was so inspired by his work. Again, I've written some stuff down. I don't necessarily have to stick to the story. His website, his work is visible on YouTube, on Facebook, and he does so many things. Again, I think it wouldn't do justice for me to present his work, just because I want to keep it short. Uh, so again, he was such a great inspiration, and he really got me just to trust myself and think that one day the opportunity will come, and it did come. And the last inspiration that I had was the late Graham Bell, and I think uh, maybe some of you, if not all, have gotten the chance to meet him or interact with him a little bit more than I did. There's a pretty created a dramatic set of circumstances in which I got to interact with him literally at the end of his life. So at some point, had him as a Facebook friend, and I was just, as Dominic was saying, I was seeing the content that he shared, and from time to time, I would get to know some of the projects, some of the places that he had been to, and I was just following him. So I saw this advertisement, him talking about a PDC, an online PDC that would feature permaculture educators from all over the world, and they were looking for teachers. And I did have some experience at that point in time. I think, yeah, it must have been 2022. Hopefully, I don't get this wrong. Yes, 2022 in summer. I was hoping to have the opportunity to talk to him, to get to know him. That wasn't possible, and he agreed that we do an online interview. And to be honest, I think we talked more about the frameworks that I'm presenting to you right now than of permaculture skills of practical experience, I don't know, through time. And he asked me a few questions that kind of almost brought me to tears at that point in time, and I think they still do. I was fortunate enough to be selected among the people that got to contribute to this project. In February, I think that year, we got the news that he had a terminal illness, and yeah, in 2 weeks, he died. Sorry. And the work was done eventually. The Soil Food Web School invested even more time and resources in the project. Delvin Solkinson, again, who some of you might know, got to finish the work, and it's gonna be, I think it's gonna be live soon. So that's, I don't know, I find some comfort in that. Anyway, so here I am, inspired by all of these people, and I'm a permaculture designer, consultant, trainer. I support individuals and small producers. Uh, I think you can read this on the screen. I've lived in 3 countries, and yeah, I think at some point in time I just decided this is what I'm gonna do. And I got to do a PDC, an online PDC that lasted for 18 months. And I had to I had to fight a lot of fears, a lot of my own limitations, and I don't know. I try to keep going, and yeah, even though the tears are here, and it's just the interactions with Graham really left an imprint on me. Just how he would push people to push and trust people even beyond what they could do at that point in time. And I think this basically happened. I hope that it happened with other people who were involved in the project. I hope that they got just as much energy and trust that we received from Graham. Now, let's get to the land. So, this was in 2023 when Graham passed away. But now I go back in time to the story of the place. It's just the last presentation, the last bit before the break. So the project has a name, just a loose translation. It would mean the garden from our world. It's just some play upon words in French. There's a very there's a phonetical similarity to something else, so that's a nice thing to include in that. And we started it in 2020 when, after a few failed projects, I met Brigitte. So she's a good friend and she's married to Raphael. together. They have 4 children, and the 2 grandmothers, so the couple's mothers, the 2 mothers actually live together. So it's a 3-storied house with 3 generations living on site, having different needs. Brigitte was ready. When I met her, she was, I think, in more than one way, she was aligned with some permaculture frameworks, if not all. We worked quite a lot. First, it was more of an like just me talking to her, finding out what she needed. And again, I'm mentioning this in the written form, but I got to understand, how the site behaved over time, what her projects were, and I got a pretty good sense, even in that point in time, of what the needs of the project and what her needs would be. We're going to address that in the second part of the presentation. Again, you have quite a few information here. There's also a page dedicated to the project, thanks to the work of Dominique and so many other people supporting the European Permaculture Network. So we have a page there. And again, I've tried to do it justice in the sense that although I am the storyteller and to a great degree, I'm also a participant, a full participant in this project. It's not just my project. Again, I'm going to mention a little bit more about this in the second part. But for now, I think this is a welcome break. At least it is for me. I'm going to drink some water. And I saw some questions popping up, or they were just comments. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to hopefully interact with you a little bit.
Wow.
So sorry,
Well,
go ahead, Dominic.
yeah, amazing. Thank you, Călin, so far.
Should I check the chat? Would that be
There's a
okay?
question in the chat so
Dom
far there. But Joe is saying that it's fascinating. Joe, you want to add to it?
Yeah, it was really, really interesting to be introduced to those frameworks that you mentioned, and how you took them with such enthusiasm and brought them into your permaculture work. And I just felt that it was absolutely fascinating, and I've taken lots of notes to go and research some of those aspects more deeply myself, and kind of bring in the idea of theatre and drama and these social works, and really actively bringing them into permaculture, I think is just fantastic, really great. So yeah, really appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words, and to kind of put out all the framework that I used. I was also quite inspired by the previous presentation by Konstantinos, with whom I've never spoke, but I also got a sense of his work. And I wasn't so sure that I was going to bring all of this complexity, which for me it makes sense. I read my own story and it makes sense to some people who have maybe seen certain things in common, drama, schools, free schools, education, yeah, maybe the theater of the oppressed. Maybe that is something that people have come in contact with. But again, to some extent, all of these people, I think they've worked on the core stuff, the relationship, how we relate to life. It was more people-centered, what I've brought until now. Sorry. But yeah, these are very valuable frameworks. And just to kind of, yeah, Steve, you want to ask a question? Sorry. Okay. We can't hear you, or I can't hear you.
No, we can't hear you, Steve. There is something with your microphone. No. Modern technology. No, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I think there's an internal microphone of the computer, and maybe you could switch from one to the other. I get that quite a few times, and I was quite worried. I think we can read your intentions, but we can't hear you. Anyway, maybe we can fix this for later and we can have some interactions. What I wanted to bring, and I didn't have time to fully acknowledge it, in the realm of social justice, the work, the frameworks that were pertaining to theater that Augusto Boal has developed over time, when he got the chance to go back to Brazil and work again as a theater director and a social, let's say, I don't know what to call it. Anyway, the important thing is that he was elected into the Brazilian federal parliament, and he built teams of people who have done some wonderful work. This you can find in a book called Legislative Theater. It's edited by Routledge, depends on how you want to pronounce it. I can I can help you find the references for everything that I've put into the presentation. Maybe we save that for the end. Dominic, how are we with time? I think I've done about 45 minutes until now.
Right, yes. So
Okay.
just 30 minutes left. Good on time.
Everyone had a chance to take a breath? Cool. I'm just gonna drink a little bit of water and I'm going ahead with the presentation once again. Oh no. Sorry. Here we go. Where can I find it? Okay, it's not helping me now. Okay, I did the same thing earlier. Full screen. Why can't I go? Wait. Okay, this is a bit embarrassing.
No
I'm
worries.
sorry.
Yeah. Adobe PDF is not the most UI friendly thing.
I just did it before, so I did the same operation.
Can you try Control L?
I'll try.
Control L.
Okay, thank you, Dominic. So the presentation of the project, and then we move on to how I've tried and how we've tried, because at the beginning it was mainly me and Brigitte, and little by little, quite a few people got into the flow of things. So this presentation also comes from the angle of having acted the permaculture principles or having reinterpreted them. So my first one is observe and interact beyond any physical boundaries. So the journey started with me having no property. So I live as an expat in France. I've been there for 15 years. Right now, I'm back at my parents' place in Romania, but this is just visiting. So living in France, I had no property of my own. At that point in time, I was also living in the city, and this was just after the first lockdown. So travel was limited. There was no way I could get any experience elsewhere. So I just kind of started looking at properties at what I saw around me, and I started designing them in my mind. I had to practice, I had to start somewhere, and I would notice these opportunities. And to start the project in a very practical sense, what I realized when I had done quite a bit of walking and observing and talking to Brigitte was that we needed a lot of soil covers. And I asked her if she had knowledge of these techniques, so of composting, of mulching, of everything, and if she was also available and willing to do some dirty work. And she was, and the story has been going on for 4 years and a half. So what we did was look for local resources that came in the form of organic waste. And you can see where we got it from. I'm not going to read everything out from the presentation. We got wood chips and all kinds of brute woody materials. We got cardboard, wood pallets, plants to propagate. So either we took cuttings from the wet prairie right next to the project, or we started propagating our own plants, and then we would trade them with other people. This was in a moment, so not only were we kind of confined, at least to a small extent, to the area or to the region we lived in, but also nurseries weren't being uh, didn't have the stock that they would normally do, because surprise, surprise, it wasn't being grown on site. It wasn't even the plants that they would sell, they didn't even come from 50 kilometers from within a 50-kilometer range. So at that point in time, we said, okay, we have access to these resources, which come in the form of waste. It's called waste, maybe because we don't know how to deal with them. So again, we observed, we decided to interact, and we've been doing all kinds of composting. And although you might not understand anything from this picture that I featured here to the right, but actually it has a lot of layers of information. In these bags, you have, in the black bags you see here, this is um, inoculated straw, mushroom inoculated straw from a local mushroom producer. So this gets discarded after 2 or 3 cycles of production. We get this from free. We have to go there. We have to be able to pack it and use it. And later in the project, you're going to see how we creatively did something a little bit more than just getting the waste off of other people and building our own project. In the picture, you also see some straw on top of horse manure from nearby stables. And this was basically on the path, on the road that Brigitte took every single day to take 2 of her children to school. So they went to a local Steiner Waldorf school, sorry, and she would pass by these horse stables. So we found that this was a resource that we could really dig into. And I have another picture, I haven't put it in the presentation. There, we have literally mountains of horse manure. We've been trying to share this information and ways of doing stuff with horse manure creatively with other people. Again, we're gonna get this. We're gonna get to the more creative part later. So we got all of these resources from nearby. So as you can see, I didn't think that there were any edges to the project that actually mattered, because being so close to other people and to so many different operations, the space is located on the edge of the Grand Lyon. So Grand Lyon means the metropolitan area. So we have access to the surplus that you actually get in an urban area, but also to some of the let's say privileges that you would have in the countryside. So properties are bigger. This one isn't that big. It's 1.5 acres, but spaces are bigger. So, for example, hay, it's spoiled quite often, and you have other things becoming available at different moments in time. And we just started engaging. We started taking those observations and doing something creative with it. And we started to catch and store energy. And this came, again, this came in many, many different forms. I've done so many hours of compost. I think I'm getting close to maybe 1,000 hours of doing some form of compost on site in 5 years, and I'm not the only one. And we saw this because compost doesn't necessarily have to be fast compost or hot compost, or, doesn't have to be a certain method that gets used more than the others. We've learned how to deal with these resources on different time scales in different ways. And we try to apply these principles to our daily lives. As I mentioned, I listened quite a lot to Brigitte. I asked her a lot of questions about how she would go about her daily life. Just like me, she was an independent contractor. She would do some jobs, so she could choose how she moved around, but she did have a lot of responsibilities. So the more we interacted with different resources around us, the more we also got to speak to a lot of people. So we integrated these people. This was also another form of energy that we got to store, so to speak, even if it was for short amounts of time. So we welcomed them to the project. We showed them what we would do. We also went to other projects and we tried to share some information and to see what they were doing. So we were doing this weaving of getting a hold of resources. Some of them were ignored before we started doing this, and then the information, the knowledge spread, and we try to keep them in flow. I'm going to show you later what I mean by that. And here's an example of obtaining a yield, or maybe sometimes you can actually find it. So these are all discarded potatoes from the organic shops. I think what you have in that box, I remember it right now. I think it's like 6 or 7 kilos of potatoes. So either because they sprouted or because they were green, they were not fit either for human consumption, and the stores realized, okay, we're not going to be able to sell them, and we couldn't consume them either. But we started again, along with the other resources that we had, we started playing around, and we found this method of using the yield that other people had gotten. So this was discarded yield. We felt there was no point to do compost with potatoes, because if you put them in the ground and you have enough mulch to put it on top, then it sprouts and it comes back again and you get the yield later. So at first it's not your yield, but then later it becomes yours. However, we did find there's an added value to using potatoes in this creative way, because what we were hoping to do was actually a food forest. So we weren't looking just, okay, let's get some resources that other people produce, or let's just be opportunistic. We also wanted to pioneer. So we found out that planting a tree and then doing a lot of mulching and surrounding it with potatoes, keeping them under heavy mulch, actually gives a lot of advantage to the tree that we planted in the middle. So in a not in a practical sense, we discovered that, okay, we can use these yields creatively to get even more yield, because this is our way through ecological succession. We invited other people to do this. This was very, very fun, because like in 5 to 10 minutes, we use a lot of cardboard. It's easy to manipulate. We'd put it on the ground. We'd punch some holes into the cardboard. We'd put the potatoes, and then a lot of straw, a lot of hay, a lot of cut grass on top, and then we could leave it for 6 months, and we could move on to something more interesting in the meantime. So we would be doing design. We would have people from the community contribute to this. We'd spread the knowledge. And again, this is a resource that is available almost everywhere. So again, we used surplus, and we also had surplus in the form of food. So some of the discarded food from the stores actually was still good to eat. So we had to go through it quite fast. It's laws in France. For example, if you get delivered tomatoes every single week and you haven't sold all 100 kilos that you have, and you still have 20 kilos left, you can't put on the stand the 20 kilos that are old and the new tomatoes. So some tomatoes, some plants, some produce are simply discarded because the new batch has to come in. So there's really a reality of what is considered waste, and unjustifiably so. And again, we saw this as an opportunity for us, but then when we got the chance to do some permablitzes, we would invite people, hey, come and help us. and then we would offer hot meals. After 1 year, I think, of the project, we even started what we call a community fridge, a shared fridge. So excess food.
Okay, now he's gone. Okay, so battery died probably. Anyone want to say anything, comments on it so far?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to say something. Hi, everyone.
Yes.
I'll say something because I have to go. I have another meeting at 8:30, but I wanted to share a little bit. Very inspiring what I heard, and I really like the fact that Călin started applying his knowledge, even though he doesn't have land of his own. And what I would like to say about that is that property is definitely overrated as a concept, and that it shouldn't be a limitation for anyone to start applying what they know. Personally, I don't own any of the land that where I grow food or where I apply where I apply permaculture. Sporos bought the farm and the olive groves and the other gardens that we have. We rent all of it, and sometimes I get this strange look from people, especially permaculture designers and practitioners, when I tell them that, and they are like, so why do you bother? Why would you do that? Invest so much time and work and money to a land that is not yours and which the owner might take from you? And the reply is that, well, it's because I don't do it for myself. I do it also for the community. And those trees that I plant, I might not be there, but someone is going to harvest the fruit and enjoy the shade. And the trees, the birds are going to enjoy it. So don't let that not having land stop you from taking the first step. And thank you. Thank you, Nick, for running these. I missed the previous one. I was busy, unfortunately, but I did watch it on. Hopefully, I will watch it on a video. And
Yes.
I'll see you next week. Thanks,
Yes.
everyone. And do say hello to Călin when he comes back. Bye for now.
He's on the way back. Thank you, Konstantinos.
You're welcome. See you next soon.
Bye-bye.
Sorry, everyone. Had a small technical problem. Okay. Let me jump back. Control L. Am I sharing my screen? No, I am not sharing my screen.
Now you do.
Please let me know if you can see it.
Yeah, all good.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
So we started doing permablitzes, we started doing some workshops, and we felt, okay, we're getting a lot of these resources in flow, and we're getting some added value out of all of these processes. And we started getting some visits, and we were sharing these ideas, and we were getting also inspired by other people. And also this was in a time, this is 2021, 2022, when the COVID, let's say the restrictions and everything that else that came with the situation was kind of impacting the lives of different people. Sorry, here. So self-regulation came in the form of me seeing how a lot of people, so we would have quite a few people kind of come, try, even though it wasn't something that they necessarily wanted to do long term. And that was actually a good source of information, because what I wanted to show with this picture, I saw how people would interact with the way I was designing the space already. So I was creating beds that were a certain width, and from a permaculture point of view, or using permaculture techniques, it made sense to make them a certain dimension and using certain materials. And with the feedback and being able to see so many people come on site, ask questions, and just interacting with them, I started changing the way I would design. And what you have here is what is now a more intensive part of the project. I call it the syntropic area. So it was planted very, very densely. And again, we always had excess organic materials. As I mentioned already, we were quite a few people in the community kind of trying new techniques in parallel at the same time. So from time to time, because we had these opportunities afforded by having access to food stuff that we had to, turn into something else, we were interacting with these people. And again, I think you see a pattern here where I would design, but also other people would kind of co-design the space through their feedback. And sometimes we would ask them to actually do certain things. So bits and pieces of the actual project have been done by people who came there and they did a practical workshop. And I go back there, so just to kind of hurry this timeline through time, I go back, I design again, we implement it, and then I see how my ideas actually turn into something else through the way that people interact with them. And you're going to see something a little bit more and something that speaks for itself soon. So about using and valuing renewable resources and services, this picture, I don't think it speaks volumes. However, every single pot that we have on site, uh, I hope you're gonna see the humor in this. We actually get it from the cemeteries. So each country, each culture with its own practices and cultural habits and everything. Here you have people bringing new pots with flowers, with plants for the grave, to the graves of their loved ones. Every single week, you go to their garbage bin and you find perfectly fine pots, and we even find ceramic pots, which are quite expensive. And we've been trying to see all of these opportunities around us. So as I already mentioned, we recover organic waste from the stores. Some other NGOs actually do this as well. We try to capture these energies and these not products, but elements, these items. We try to use them creatively. We try to do quite a few things before something actually gets to a compost pile. So even though I've spoken quite a bit about doing compost and using these resources, we actually try to do seed saving. I mentioned this right at the end. We do some food preserves, and there's another principle that we try to apply, and you're going to see how that weaves into the whole project. We had opportunities because also a lot of people were coming on site, and we realized it's going to be difficult in terms of being able to have a family life. Brigitte and her husband continued to work. So we soon found the limits of our social interactions. So what happened at that point in time was they decided to have a compost toilet. So we had to build a compost toilet. Some of it was done with discarded materials from elsewhere. And speaking of skills of other people, we decided to do this, but we didn't have the skills. So at that point in time, again, we started reaching out again and talking about the opportunity that we had and we afforded, and we tried to find other people that had the skills. So these services, we were lucky enough that other people knew how to build light structures. We asked for help. We try to always give something back, or at least something else back in place of what we received. And we try to stick to the principle of producing no waste. So what you see here in the picture is the platform which holds one composting toilet. Maybe you don't see this, you aren't able to distinguish it. We used a Jeff Lawton template to do them with recycled garbage bins, where the droppings would be taken through a pipe. Anyway, I can share a link to this. And we did all of this with around 10 people coming in for about, I think it was over the duration of 6 weeks, something like that. 10 people, more or less 10 people would come once or twice per week with somebody who had really had the skills. And we kept building this. This is done on a platform. It has a foundation, so it's not going to be blown away by the wind. It's not going to be moved if the soil moves. And we try to integrate this way of thinking, and we try to not we're trying not to produce any waste. And if there's any waste, we try to store it in the form of human manure. Anyway, so yeah, we try to value this, and I mentioned a few of the social underlining, let's say, themes. We saw that a lot of people around us didn't even have access to some of the resources that we had. We had the space to take some of this waste and to do something else with it, but other people didn't have the money and didn't have the opportunity to do anything. And again, we try to integrate the needs of these people. So little by little, having a compost toilet right next to the garden, that actually paved the way for creating the community garden that I mentioned earlier. Through time, this project had to grow. It had to be kind of helped at first. I was kind of doing some of the workshops to train people, but soon after Brigitte started being the leader of the group, I kind of moved away from that project within the bigger project. I kept designing and I kept doing other stuff. And this past summer, even Brigitte stopped being involved on a day-to-day basis. And right now there's a group of around 10 people, I think 8 or 9, that come and have quite a few, let's say, facilities at their disposal. They have the compost toilets, they have water that is being stored right at the back of the platform, and a lot of other things that we've put in place. So again, just overall, we've tried to address some social problems as well, not just do permaculture design. But at the same time, I realized that there's an added value in actually doing things really, really slowly. And when I say slowly, I also mean by integrating an abundant resource that we have on site, which again, I don't know if you can distinguish what you see. A lot of the lines, the edges of the beds, these are all bamboo. So we had a lot of bamboo, we had a lot of resources. We didn't well, nobody sees bamboo as a resource. We did, and we use them to make these raised beds. And like the ones that you see in the picture, I think there's close to maybe 80 or 100 now in the project. And as I mentioned, we have bamboo growing on site, and it takes a lot of time to process it. We have to keep it under management. We can't take too much away from it. That kind of keeps us moving really, really slowly. But at the same time, we've been using these resources and these techniques. We move really, really slowly, but we also make the process visible to people, even if they're not coming to a workshop of mine or, willing to adopt the same techniques. At the very least, they can see these wheels in motion. I mentioned also already using the resources, so food waste, fruit and vegetables. We actually get a lot of value out of it because we do compost, and in time, this compost turns into good soil, and seeds actually grow out of it. I don't think I have pictures in this gallery showing the nursery operation that right now supports the gardening project and the overall project. But again, this is an added value, and with us moving at such a slow pace, well, people get to see it, and we also need we need help to manage the nursery, and which we get. So that's really a joy to mention. Yeah, and we kept sharing this information with other people. So yeah, I just think there's an added value of just people coming in, stealing. There's a term I think Bill Mollison used, creative theft. I can't remember the whole expression, the whole metaphor, but there was something really, really beautiful that he developed over time as a technique. So again, integration rather than segregation. You have a few things that you can read, and I already mentioned that we used bamboo first as stakes to drive them into the ground for us to be able to build upwards, to build terraces, to build raised beds, to build even what I call berms. And in the picture, what you actually have is a lot of waste created really close to where you see it. So this wasn't, these were woody materials for the most part, and all kinds of coarse materials that would not break down so quickly. And we used this in a space that we could afford the time to let them sit, decompose at their own rate. And when I say decompose at their own rate, I'll give you an example. It's a big walnut tree that had to be taken down by one of the neighbors. And it was in a position where, although the tree cutters could come in and cut it into pieces, there was no way of taking it out with a machine. So we said to the neighbor, we don't know how we're going to use it, but we're going to take it. And at some point in time, we had the extra resources, the extra materials to use, and we took those big logs of the walnut. I think it was more than 50 years old. So the trunk was, I don't know, 60 centimeters across in diameter. And with a lot of other materials, we found that we could do something creative. So over time, we learned how to integrate everything. I think asbestos, we can't integrate that, and we did find some of it on site. So this kind of chemical waste that nobody likes to deal with, and unfortunately it's there. It's an urban area. It's a peri-urban, right on the edge. But all of the organic resources, we managed to integrate them and to make something that hopefully over time gets to be beautiful and inspiring. As I mentioned already, in so many ways, we use small and slow solutions, and this is probably the slowest technique that we can use. These are oyas, or ceramic pots, put one on top of each other. As I mentioned, we get these for free. If you go there and, if you pass by the cemetery and you have time to look, you're going to find this resource quite often, in France at least. And we have probably around 60, 70 oyas, and this was done again with community participation. And we found a way to use these techniques. And why it's important to us is because one of the core problems with the project has always been water retention in summer. So all of the efforts, everything that would be done over the course of 1 year, in this climate, we're right on the edge of the Mediterranean climate. In this climate, over summer, if you don't have a lot of solutions and you're able to use them almost all at the same time, you can't deal with the drought. And for us, this solution was to integrate these oyas. So it's drip irrigation, or we take a can, we've brought water the closest possible to the beds. We take this water, we pour it into the ceramic pots, and they let it sip into the ground very, 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 very slowly. We found that in this arrangement, I think these are 5-liter pots. So when we manage to put in 10 liters, we can leave it alone for about 5 days, which is a great advantage, a great luxury, to be honest, to have with such a complex project. And just this allows us to also take care of the humans that are involved. Yeah, and also quite important, I mentioned it here regarding the age of participants. Actually, most people who have come to my workshops, I think they're above 50 years old. we have at least 3 or even 4 gardeners who are 70 years or plus. And having these techniques at our disposal actually allowed us to make this the least unpleasant, the most durable, because it doesn't they don't have to come back so many times to water the garden. Because we have raised beds, it also gets them closer to these. So we save energy, we save human energy. And hopefully we will also inspire visitors. We use and value diversity. And again, because I've talked so much about compost, I thought I'd share with you a compost pile. It's not the prettiest image that you could see, but to be honest, this is another form of diversity that we've come to appreciate. Because if we want to reach our goal, which is of creating this food forest, which is growing already, it's some of the fruit trees that we planted, and some of the fruit trees that already existed on site are actually producing. But to actually get to a level of production, we need to bring in diverse organic materials. And for us, again, it's a luxury. We bring in these big piles of organic waste. Some of it, sometimes all of it is discarded right away. So it's not, we can't take out any immediate value out of it. But by doing these diverse composts and using different composting techniques, we found that with limited resources, we actually get to a point in time within, I'd say, 9 months to 2 years. Within 9 months to 2 years, we actually get a very good result from the soil life that comes from the diversity of waste that we also bring into the project. And as I mentioned it at the end of this page here at the bottom, around 15 people are involved in this project right now. And if we're talking about diversity, we're also talking about diversity of skills. So there was not a homogeneous group already available to work, and not everybody wants to do permaculture, which is great, because within the functioning project that is a community garden, we've had people that came on site and that had skills that we didn't have regarding foraging, regarding all kinds of ways to do food preserves. Sorry, I was looking for the word. So we've learned how to take the diversity in skills and multiply that and conjugate that by the diversity in resources that we can get our hands on. So I'm getting closer to the end. Hopefully, I haven't looked at time. I can't see it. So using edges and valuing the marginal. I think by now you've gotten a sense of where we are and what we're building towards. What I wanted to show through this picture, because again, we're really spoiled in terms of resources. Just recently, I haven't featured that pictured in the presentation, but we have about 15 tons of wood chips on site available at this time. So what at the beginning of the project was us going after all kinds of resources around us. Right now, we have different professionals also helping out any way they can. So they bring in the wood chips, they discharge them on the site. And we've learned that we can actually build our own edges. So what I'm trying to show with this picture here, kind of speaking metaphorically of edges, is that with enough work and overtime, with diversity, we actually create our own edges. And what I mean by that is that right now we have an edge between the deep mulch that is actually, so we have wood chips on the footpath. The footpath itself at this point in time is actually creating compost. It's no longer a nuisance, because before it featured grass that would invade the gardening beds. But right now, because we were afforded such a chance to have these resources, we're finding ways of reinventing and revaluing these edges we're using patterns, as you can see. So there's a certain spacing, and maybe in another picture, I think you might have noticed that there's a terracing. So these are raised beds, but they're on terraces. And I'm almost at the end. Yes, I'm almost at the end. So creatively using and responding to change. Well, as I mentioned so many times, we've recycled, we've found out so many creative ways in which we could bring these resources in and giving them new life. And what I wanted to show here is, so these are the trunks. These are trunks of the walnut tree that was cut from the neighbor's property. And before having this resource at our disposal, this space wasn't usable. It already featured, maybe you see it now as a bush. It actually was a tree before, and it was being surrounded by a bush. And then because of the lack of management, we didn't notice when it started kind of dying off. And at some point in time, it was brought down by a storm, and we had to redo the area again, and we used the resources. Again, I mentioned this so many times. We used the resources, and we saw this as a way, okay, as a way of nature showing us you're not putting in the level of effort that you need to for certain areas. We're working with more difficult ground. You're not going to have 100% success. And yeah, we learned that we need these feedback loops. We try to learn from our mistakes. We observe what is going on. And when there's a chance, as we've had so many over the years, we've tried to do our best and yeah, get to a point in time. I think probably next year there will be no more design intervention needed on site. So we're probably going to be finished with putting everything in place. And what I mean by that is having berms, having swales, having these terraces, and having everything that we want into the ground. Right now, it's about 70% planted. We're talking about 1.5 acres, and out of this surface, I think we're using 1 acre. And what I mean by by the fact that we're getting quite close to, project reaching its potential is a pretty nice surprise that we had. Right at the bottom of the project, I have a picture taken of this, but it was just too dark at that point in time. At the bottom of the project, because of everything that had been done, let's say at a higher point in altitude, we actually now have a rising water table. And before the project started, there had been a pond right next to the bamboo grove, and it was overgrown. You had a lot of weeds growing into and out of the pond. And because of all of the earthworks that we have done, I think, again, we're talking about 80 berms and terraces and raised beds and all of these things adding on and on and on and on, us recycling these materials on site. We now have a pond that it's starting to be lovely again, and it fills simply with groundwater. So we're getting to a point in time where we're going to be ready to show the world, just how fruitful permaculture design can be. And also that along the way, we really have gotten so much value out of working with so many people. I had a framework in mind. I thought, okay, this has a lot of potential, but I had no guarantees neither that Brigitte would back me all the way through, that she would find what she needs from the frameworks that I was trying to implement. And just community participation over time just kind of gave me boosts of energy. Right now, I got to be sick because I went there in the month of February, the beginning of February, and for like 5 days straight, I wanted to work on these things in the garden. My feet were cold and I caught a cold, so here I am. But again, I felt like the response of the community, and it's not necessarily a group of people that I could name, but just people coming in and out, and a lot of people just bringing in material. Sometimes people just do this. They know that we use it. We try to give back in more than one way. Anyway, this was my presentation. Thank you for coming along this journey. Hopefully you've managed to kind of see these threads, these storylines that I try to bring in. And again, maybe you have some questions. If not, the PDF will be available. I'll send it to Dominic and you'll be getting it by email if you want it, of course, or Dominic, you can find a way of sharing it with whoever is interested.
Yeah, we'll find a way.
If you have any questions, I'd love to engage with you.
Questions, everyone? So, my question would be, all these frameworks in the beginning, was it challenging for you to implement those, or were they just like natural coming to you and you just went along? You're muted, Călin, you're muted.
A very good question. Yeah, 20 seconds about myself. Before doing this, the one project that I was really involved with, that I was doing in my life, was improvisation trainings
Okay.
in theater.
Yeah, that
So
kind of
in a way, I found a recipe. I think it works for me. Just taking in as much as I can, letting myself be influenced or informed or inspired by other people, other frameworks, kind of hold on to the hope that I'll have the chance to implement them somewhere, somehow.
Yeah.
And I've been inspired by my PDC teacher. I think to a great extent, I just followed into some of the footsteps that he presented in the PDC. So Jeff Lawton, and when he started his permaculture career, he did a lot of composting. He would get the waste from all of the restaurants and all of the places in his town. And he said at some point he had like 10, 11, or 12 compost piles. I never knew which tools, which skills, which framework I would get the chance to use. And again, I kind of let myself be guided by whatever opportunity I thought was in front of me.
Yeah.
Sometimes people did ask for something specific, and I kind of use that framework every time I get a client in a consultation, maybe doing a project. Like, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, if I'm able to do it, but I listen to the person, and if I get the idea, I think the person kind of also sees it in my eyes. Maybe a spark goes, and say, okay,
Okay.
I have an idea.
Thank
Would
you.
you be willing to listen? What do you think about this framework? I try to kind of right now when I present my ideas to projects to clients, I put it in a visual document. So I do it
Yeah, understood.
graphic design,
Yeah.
but then I don't show all the layers.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Yeah.
although I've had to kind of
No
put it
worries.
into one presentation, I present it in layers. It's simply impossible. They might follow me. They might sound, oh, he's knowledgeable, but is he crazy as well? Well, I try to break it down into, frameworks and layers of information that they can get. And I also try to take it step by step. Okay, let me put a technique out there. Let me see if it resonates with them. And most of the time, not always, obviously there's failures. Most of the time they bite. They'll hang on to something. They'll have a way in. I think that's what I'm psychologically speaking, that's what I'm always looking for in clients, engaging with people. Okay, is there a way for me to find a subject outside of permaculture that I can talk to them about?
Okay.
Do they already bring something? And yeah, what comes out of me sometimes it's through these frameworks. Hey, I know about education, and I think education goes well with permaculture or community work. So yeah, when there's the opportunity, I try to seize it.
I think it's a very interesting approach you have there. Totally. Um, Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. That was very interesting. Steve, anything to add? Do you have anything?
If I can, yes, I'm
Yeah.
finally. Technology, it was the plug had pulled out. Technology. Yeah, a great story, Calin. A great story. I just love your whole way you've approached our world of permaculture. And, you know, I reflect on your idea of storytelling. You know, I've spent quite a lot of time with Mollison, and he was a great storyteller, I tell you. You know, we would often sit up all night, and the stories would just carry on. And he would invite others to tell stories too. He'd often intentionally set up arguments with people, and he would play one off the other in order to develop a story. So, you know, he was a very intelligent man, and I think his intelligence in the whole world that we're talking about has not really been recognised. You know, some of us from the first generation are aware of that, and I certainly express it as often as I can. But yeah, it's great. But I, you know, I was picked up on your story in the early part of this presentation about having children in the play, in their theatre, and allowing a considerable degree of freedom in their expression. You know, my immediate reflection was the book Animal Farm. And it's sort of, okay, if we let children play without any boundaries, where does it go to? And it's an incredible science to explore, but observe. And it's quite phenomenal. I have 4 daughters at home still, and up until very recently they were all homeschooled, and it was always interesting to allow their considerable degree of freedom to let them explore what they wanted to explore. Yeah, and Martina, my partner, and I, we instigated the whole children in permaculture movement, which is growing quite strongly. So, you know, that's an exciting realm of how we can actually bring children into the whole subject of permaculture. And recently, Martina and I had a trip back to Czech Republic where she grew up, and we went to the Slovakia Permaculture Conference and the Czech Permaculture Conference, and we introduced the idea to one of the Czech girls who had picked up on the whole children in permaculture movement quite strongly. We introduced the idea of teenagers in permaculture, because, you know, when we look around the world, the teenagers are in a very volatile phase of their life. Many of them fall off the rails, and they all need guidance of in some way in order to assist them through those years. And, you know, we launched the idea of, hey, let's look at trying to build teenagers in permaculture. So the acronym there is TIPS, TIPS. Yeah. So, you know, it's a great little crossover acronym. It's offering the tips for teenagers. So, you know, something that maybe we could play with, and Calin, with your interest in youth and children, maybe that could evolve, and we could link people together in those networks to see where it expands to. Because, you know, when you look at the inner depths of teenage world, it is a phenomenal phase in life which directs where they will continue in their life. Yeah.
During the teacher training where I've been in Bulgaria, it's a course that Rosemary Morrow developed. So the end at the end, like in a PDC, you have to design your lot. At the end of a TPT, you have to design the PDC. So yeah, and what we did, we designed a PDC for teens.
Ah, brilliant.
Yep.
Brilliant.
So lots of
where is it, Dominic? Where is it?
Yeah, I have to check where the documentation is. I'm sorry on that.
Oh, well, you
computer.
You need to take one of Luby's and energies and write the book.
Yeah, probably another one. Okay, yes.
Yeah.
Paulina, anything to add? Do you want to say something? Any feedback or question, comment?
Yeah, it was a beautiful presentation. I truly enjoyed it and I got really inspired. I just, for the questions, I know I have very foggy everything today. So it was just like, it was a lot for me just to also take in information and take notes. But this was very like holistic and creative and playful storytelling that Călin did. It was a big pleasure to just observe. And I take notes for sure because it was very close subject to me. Like the first, I also don't own a land, and it doesn't seem like it will happen in the near future, but I am already interested. So it was very useful to hear experience from that perspective of someone who has knowledge and passion towards something and already want to practice, but there is this, okay, yeah, I don't have a land and resource and lifestyle that just, yeah, a bit different. And also the social part of permaculture, which is basically what I do at the moment and do it in a very beginner way by working with kids in a, yeah, just in a public school where it's not really introduced at all. And so I'm a bit, not like an imposter, but no one really understands what I'm doing and what do I want to do. Not the teachers, not the kids. So it's also very, I think I need also circles like this, conversations like this to also support myself in continuing, because I feel a bit, yeah, just a bit dumb in a way, because there is like in Iceland where I'm at the moment, there is, you can clearly see that they're very wrong resource distribution and whatever, just very wealthy country and level of life is very high and resources are taken for granted. Like it just I was paralyzed for like my first half of the year here, just like observing how much just goes to waste. And I don't know, it was very hard to went from this freezing, scared response to really just like making little steps, because even little steps seemed, yeah, very hard to make, at least for me, like without people around who will share the same interest.
Yeah.
But now it's better. It's slowly getting better, and I also appreciate that there is this also online community with whom I can share and listen and inspire. So,
Yeah, thank you, Paulina. And I wanted to reflect back to you. I didn't have time to reference everything that I had tried before, but just like you, in a society where certain resources are abundant or seem abundant, like France, I also got a lot of failures in terms of projects, starting them and not finding enough community participation. They were not interested in waste or in actually addressing their needs. Keep going. I think there's some beautiful resources. I can source them at some other point in time. Music about permaculture. I think that might attract some youth. And it's actually a couple. They're both from Australia. Um, Formidable Vegetable, the music. And I forgot her name. I can link it. I can send it back to Dominic and he can send it to you. I've been using her.
Charlie McGee.
And his partner, I can't remember her name. Anyway, she's a graphic designer. So she's been always translating ideas, techniques into graphic, and maybe it's graffiti, maybe it's some other way of using less words or getting their attention somehow. Anyway, plenty of resources, and hopefully you can keep carrying on the torch, and you'll find your own inspiration and what exactly clicks for you.
Is it a
Yep, that's the music,
okay?
and her name is Brenna
Brenna
Quinlan.
Quinlan. Yeah, she was here at the PermaTalks. We had her.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing graphic design.
Yeah, and
Yeah, he's a classic Australian, and his whole manner of singing is just very classic Australian, and it's great. It's a great uplifting beat that he has. Yeah. And you know, you imagine taking that right through the subject that you're talking about, Calin, to enthuse children and teenagers into that sort of really positive message that he has in his songs. Yeah.
yeah, and the work they maybe Paulina, you can see the work. You can click on a site that Dominic shared. Just getting them exposed, any youth, even just adults, being exposed to the work in more than one through more than one media is interesting and hopefully resourceful, and kind of gets their energies going. Oh.
Okay. I will stop the recording here. Okay. Thank you, Călin. And yeah, next week it's permaculture and shamanism. So I have no clue what that means. So I'm really looking forward for that one. I have no idea. So let's see what it is. So it's Tom Hanfrey from Portugal.